Thank you everybody for coming out. We'll get started. Thank you for this nice spring evening coming in here to talk to us tonight. So we are here tonight to talk about the Tanner Street Riverfront or Riverside Park, how you may know it. We have it called different things in different places, but interchangeable right now. We'll figure that out as we go through what its official name is going to be. But internally, we've been calling it Tanner Street. Here, you're going to see it's called Riverfront Park. The sign says Riverside Park. So we'll figure it out. But that's the one we're talking about, behind the dentist office, behind strings and things. So I am Beth Fenstermacher. I'm the Director of Special Projects in Community Development for the City of Concord. And the bulk of the meeting will be with our design team here, but I just want to also introduce David Gill, who's the Director of Parks and Recreation here. And we have our counselors, Brent Todd and Michelle Horn up here as well. So thank you all for coming out tonight. I also want to thank Penacook Village Association, sort of organized this through that, and then Merrimack Valley for allowing us to use this space tonight. It's great to have it locally that we can do this inside. So I'll go back to the agenda real quick. So we're going to go through the project overview, and then our team will go through the project context, sort of talk about where we are, where the site sits, how they're kind of going through the design process, look at the opportunities and constraints, and then we'll talk through some design concepts. And then if anybody came to the Canal Street Riverfront Park project, where we did our democracy exercise, where we'll have different concepts around the room, and you can make your way around. You can grab some dots, and you put stickers on things that you like to see. So any concepts that you see tonight, nothing's written in stone. They don't have to, one thing doesn't only have to go with that design. You can kind of pick pieces, and we'll gather back together with the designers and kind of work through the more popular things that people want to see out at the park itself. And then we'll just reconvene real quickly just to summarize, and then we'll be on our way, hopefully by 8 o'clock tonight. So just to quickly remind you of how we got to this point, we've been talking about this for 40 years. So, things take time, but we're getting there. So it kind of first came up in the Penacook sense of place plan in the 80s, identified all the existing conditions of the riverfront, the potential public parks. So we're slowly chipping away of trying to improve the Penacook Village. We just finished, or we're about to finish, the Canal Street Riverfront Park, which is identified at that time as a potential public park. Hopefully we'll have a grand opening for that in June or July of this year. And then in 2015, most recently, the Village Master Plan, the vision of what we wanted to see in Penacook. So identifying the possible park locations, but calling out what the existing parks are and what do we want to see with these existing parks. So some of the things that came out of that from residents that we heard during that 2015 process was sort of valuing the open space that already existed and how do we make it a better experience. So some things that we heard at that time were provide more diverse plantings, provide comfortable seating, improve lighting, create a pathway, and then install interpretive panels, signs, sort of look at the historic context of the site. So you'll see in the concepts tonight that these things are addressed, but also a little bit more to get you thinking about different things that we can do with the park. So with that, I'll talk about the schedule real quick. So right now, City Council has appropriated money for the design phase, so that's what we're in right now. Funding for the construction has not been determined yet because we're not sure what it'll cost, but the goal is to apply for funding for that. So for Canal Street, we applied for federal funding and got grants for that. We're going to go through that same process, but we have to have a schematic design before we can go there. So that's where we're at right now. Hopefully have that in the next couple months so that we can go to Land and Water Conservation Fund. I think their letter of intent is around June, and then we apply fully over the summer and the fall, and we should hear by December if this is going to be moving forward, and then we'll start working with actual costs, work with City Council, and figure out a construction schedule from there. So if all things goes perfectly well and money falls from the sky, we'll start construction next summer, but we'll see where we land with other things happening. But that's sort of what we're working with right now. So it's a lot of to be determined, but this is getting the process going, and depending on how much we do and what our budget's going to be, that'll sort of maybe change what the timeline's going to be. So with that, I will pass it off to Ron and Jamie from GPI. They're the design team that worked on the Canal Street Riverfront Park, so we kept them on to continue on with this for that cohesive design along the river. And pass it away to them.
Take it away. Thanks, Beth. My name's Ron Hedrick. Thanks for having us tonight, and Jamie Felice is here as well. So I'm going to run through some slides. I'm going to talk about context. I'm going to talk about opportunities and constraints, and then I'm going to show you the 3 concept plans we've kind of come up with. And as Beth said, they're all very conceptual. They're ideas on paper. Sort of, we like to think about the smallest improvement to the largest improvement to sort of see what is possible. A lot of sites lend themselves to major changes, minor changes. This is a kind of a tough site. I'm sure if you've been down there, you know there's a lot of constraints about where you can go and what you can do, and I'll try to show that to you. So I always like to start with project context. I can't see this, so hopefully you can, but I'll go off the little screen here. We took an image of the old kind of the historic village center and positioned the park kind of in the middle of those walking circles. Those are kind of traditional planning walking circles that about a quarter mile is a 5-minute walk. So you can see this first circle is a 5-minute walk. So the park is really within walking distance, very comfortable walking distance of quite a bit of the old village center. As you know, the old mills towns, a lot of people, they walk to work. It was, probably went home for lunch, right? You know, that's the way they were set up. And then the outer circle is the 10-minute walking, so it takes you across the bridge even into Boscawen. Park is obviously adjacent to the river, which is great because we get a lot of great views there. It's about 1 acre in size, not terribly large, and it was developed in its current state back in the 1980s, which is a lot of the traces of that design are beginning to fade away. Some of the old lights are broken over. Some of the stone dust pathways are disappearing kind of into the landscape. So it's definitely in need of a refresh. Let me go back for a second. So in the context of the river, next to the Village Street Bridge, just up the stream from the new Canal Street Park, you have access in views of the water here. I'm going to show you here that downstream, predominantly here, is you've got the upper and lower falls dams that kind of impede boat access down to the Merrimack or vice versa, in addition to the falls you have there. We did identify there's a boat launch down here at the mouth of the Penacook River. I'm sorry, the Kentucket River. But the dams sort of, again, impede that. As you also see kind of over on the right, kind of where we're close to the middle and high school and Rolfe Park with a lot of active recreation activities there, ball fields, courts, playground. None of that is really envisioned for this park. It's not big enough for that. As we go upstream, kind of looking at what happens there, you've got the river park up there, and there's a boat launch kind of just upstream from that. Again, we have dams on both, kind of the river splits, and there's dams on both portions of that. There's one here and 2 down here by the old mill. This one's not terribly large. I think if you wanted to try to, anybody ever kayak, canoe the river, you could pull off there. I imagine you could probably walk around that dam and go on your way. So part of what we were thinking, and I think is part of the Canal Street project, that originally envisioned some kind of a kayak landing. People coming down river would exit the river there before the hydro dam. That got moved out of that project, and it was always kind of anticipated that it could probably fit into this park better. But just wanted to kind of give you a context of downstream and upstream, so how all that works. I also wanted to right up front say this is the glorious FEMA map showing the flood zones, and this is kind of a blow up of the area of the park, which is right here. You see 100-year flood elevations in here. It actually identifies it as elevation 310, so we'll always be cognizant of that as we do our designs. And that's essentially along the old granite walls, and it peaks in little places where you've got slopes. But we also have what's known as a floodway. And that's a bit more serious piece of information, because that'll make permitting any major changes in that more difficult when you get into filling and stuff, because that's where volumes, velocity of water and volumes of water are really moving down during flood stages. And it's found this nice old picture from 1936. The 30s were a great time. There was a lot of flooding back then. So if you're ever looking for what it could be in its worst, go back to the 30s. This is the Village Street Bridge. There's been many Village Street bridges. So this is one iteration, and you can see lapping at the bottom of the bridge and actually up on the windows of the building that's still there today. So that's an important piece of context as we design on this, to know where we're at in a regulatory sense. Just a color aerial of the site. The star marks kind of the midpoint of the park. Its relation to Tanner Street and Village Street. And now I want to focus a little bit on the historical context. I think most of you know there were a lot of mills along the river. This was yet another area. It never fails never ceases to amaze me how many things have come and gone in our lifetimes, that the buildings here that were the size and capacity of them was something else. I'll show you some of the pieces. These two pictures on the left is a portion of a dam that was once there, that directed water into the canal that Canal Street is named after. And the picture on the right, that granite block, is a portion of, I believe, what is called the head of the canal. I always think of it as the mouth, but the mouth of the river is actually where it dumps out. So that is an important feature, because it's not often you see what was the beginning of a canal still in place. One thing we recognize is historically this site was significantly modified by the mill construction, so it's very unlikely we'll have any archaeological concerns, that it's been built over many times, so it's a very disturbed site. And as I said, you've got the intake structure and walls, you've got the dam remnant, and you've got some adjacent other mill walls running through the site. And to kind of back that up, this is what's known as a Sanborn fire map. They used to produce these. I don't know if they're still in business, actually, but they used to make fire maps that were available to communities, the type of building, what it was made of, so that when a fire broke out, the firefighters had some idea what they were dealing with. And you can see here, I highlighted it. Oops. Oh, I guess I lost it. This thing right here is that structure that is out there today. So it's, in living color, it's still there. What's interesting about all the old maps is they don't show any land mass here. But when you go out here, this is all ledge, so we know there was some land mass that sort of was in front of this. But here's the old dam. Some of these old drawings, you can see it says portions of it were wood, portions of it were concrete. There might have been multiple versions of the dam. Anything's going to break in a flood, it would probably be the dam. But so you can see here where the head of the canal came off the river, went down under Village Street and past the Canal Street Park and along Canal Street. And always the clever ones, they built over the canal in multiple places. Every space was utilized, so there were different shops and large buildings. And this is an interesting structure here. This was the gatehouse, the canal. So they had some kind of gates that they could shut the river off when they were doing maintenance and that sort of thing. So, and then sort of to show some different pictures. This is kind of almost looks like it's out of the bell tower of the church down Canal Street, looking back, and you can see the left side of the picture is across Village Street, some of the buildings that were there. And over time, they changed. Here's another one from the river, a different iteration of the bridge. I've seen at least 3 or 4. But you can see the building to the left there is exactly where the park is. Those portions, those big granite walls. And you can even see on this building how it's been added to. You can actually see the gable roof of the old structure peeking out. So they kept expanding. And then a postcard in was known as the cabinet shop at one point. I guess they made cabinetry. And Actually found a history book and read a little bit about it. It's pretty interesting stuff. But of course, all that's gone now, and even the buildings along Village Street have changed. They don't actually match up to these buildings. So, turning to opportunities and constraints, we recognize a number of existing park assets. As I mentioned before, its proximity to the village center. It's a walkable park. It's a great place. You can go down, spend an hour or two if you live nearby or if you're visiting sort of the downtown. It's got ample parking for a park its size. It actually has quite a bit of parking. There's like 23 spaces. It's got great scenic river views. I'll show some of that in a second. It's got passive open space, and it's got those historical remnants that are there that are, in my mind, pretty cool reminders of the past. Just some candid shots, just to remind you of things. The one on the left is actually from the top of that granite structure looking up the river. There's some of the ledge I talked about along the waterfront. And then we've got some iron railings and kind of a concrete area kind of along the riverfront edge. So we did a site analysis. We kind of put down on paper a lot of the things that we see. I think, like I said, the big gray area in the middle is the parking area, and the sort of the dashed red line is the pedestrian circulation coming in. The sole vehicle access coming into the park is off Tanner Street. There is, if you can see those dotted green lines, there is a sidewalk connection coming in between, I believe it's the dentist shop and the guitar shop. The city holds an easement for that, so there is access, pedestrian access also off of Village Street. The little arch pathway through the middle was the old path, but as I said, it's starting to kind of fade. And one of the things we note is the views. You've got really long views kind of from the back end of the park looking up the river. You've got side views kind of across that ledgy outcrop and views right across to the rocky shores of the other side of the river. Very scenic, almost a great view in every turn. And then this is just kind of a recreation from a more recent map that we had of the old mill buildings, just highlighting some of those. So you can kind of see how some of the buildings sat in relation to the big granite walls that form the shoreline. The blue is the approximate line of the old canal, and sort of representing that gatehouse that went over it. It came off of that granite structure. So what are some of the constraints? So limited water access. We've got a lot of water right there, but hardly any way to get to it. Pretty steep granite walls. The fencing kind of keeps you back from those. Steep slopes, lack of activities is a little bit of it. It's a pretty park, but there's not a lot to do there besides sit on a bench or enjoy the views, maybe cast a line into the water. It also has poor separation to the adjacent abutter in particular. It's kind of, the house is right there. And what I would call confusing boundaries, because it's not easily discernible where the boundaries are. First time I went there, I thought the neighbor's yard was part of the park. So, it's in terms of when you define boundaries for a park, you usually like to have them outlined by public space, and in this case, it's kind of jagged and it goes around different things. So
Which house are you talking about? The one that's behind the parking lot?
51 Tanner, yeah.
That's our house.
Their house.
Yep.
Yeah.
It looks like a giant metal box.
Yeah. Yeah, that's no criticism of your house. It's just that it's right there and there's very little separation. So one of the things we kind of noticed is on our map, we initially colored in the sort of the pink color, those steeper slopes where it's just not really accessible unless you're a mountain goat. But we really realized that the combination of the slopes and the walls really walls off the river, with the small exception of right down here by the old remnant of the dam. The grades are a little more forgiving. You can get down here and you can kind of walk along the ledge and get to the edges, but it's all pretty steep, and there's a lot of brush and boulders over in here, and all that is just, it's just a vertical drop to the water. So that's one of the major constraints on a park that really benefits from being so close to the river. The other is the old granite structure, as cool as it is, it sort of creates this blind spot behind it where nefarious activity occurs, as we've been told. And you can see when you go back there, there's a lot of spray painting on the walls. There's usually a couple empty beer cans or something like that. So because there's not a lot of activity moving back behind there, and because the height of the wall is probably just over my head, it's a great place for people to kind of go and kind of hang out. So moving forward into the design concepts, taking all that kind of into consideration, we kind of put pencil to paper, kind of myself and some of Jamie and another colleague, we kind of brainstormed on different ideas, and we came up with 3 concepts that sort of walk our way into this. So the objectives, I think, going in were sort of, we want to retain the parking. We recognize that's a major asset to the park and to the village center, because you can park there and you can go right out to the businesses and the restaurants and stuff. The other thing I've seen in my career is a lot of people like to go to a park where there's a great view, sit in their car with their coffee or their paper, spend 15, 20 minutes taking in the view and never leave their park. And the first time I ever heard that, I thought that was crazy, but we do live in New England. It's cold a lot of the year, and so the parking kind of provides that. So it's sort of it's a complementary use that the parking provides. We definitely want to upgrade the pedestrian circulation. There's almost a lack of it now because the paths have all disappeared, and that's important to meet accessibility requirements, that you have kind of accessible paths throughout the park. We want to improve the passive uses where we can, and increase water and access use to whatever level we all think is the right level. And that's why I showed the context of the river. There's boat launches above and below where this park sits. There's a piece of water that probably doesn't get used as much as it does, and what kind of uses could we make of that? So here's some inspirational images. I could have gone all day with these, but we just tried to narrow it down. Some examples here. Paddleboarding, it's a possibility. Here's where they've kind of created places for fishing along the water's edge with the use of boulders. These are, I think this is out in Ohio, but we've done various versions of these kind of swing benches where you can kind of relax and swing along the water edge. And then accessibility to the water. One, to meet accessibility requirements, because that's not something that I think is currently being met. And they've got a lot of great systems out there now where they've got these transfer stations, as they're called, where a person can transfer to the platform and then kind of bump their way down and get into the vessel, leave it from a secure platform and come back to it. And I have to say, I kayak, and I'm getting to the age where getting in is not easy, or is easy. Getting out is a lot of times the hard part. So having a place where you can run up, have rails and that sort of thing, it opens it up to a larger age group. You know, it's not just for the handicap. And I want to show this picture because the combination of an additional piece of a dock could also make fishing better, because right now most of the fishing is from an elevated height, which is really not as great. So there's some inspirational images. Here's some others. We were looking at a couple things. One was, there's a piece of shoreline that's just a steep bank. Is there something we could do to kind of make that more approachable? Something like the lower right corner. The old granite structure just begs for a use. So this is about the closest example I could find, but we were thinking, what if we put like an observation deck up on top? Because you do have those great views up the river. And then this one was kind of the idea of the sloping part of that could be just some tiered seating, or this could be something maybe we could engage the water's edge with. So just some wild ideas of what could be done there to make things more usable. And then finally, I talk about the gatehouse, and I went looking for some photos. These are some images of some of them still exist, but of what gatehouses look like. They were usually kind of long, narrow buildings that straddled over the canal. And, they had the mechanisms and the motors in there for the locks or for the gates to open and close them. We're obviously not going to rebuild a gatehouse, but maybe we can draw inspiration. So this picture on the right was showing kind of the idea of maybe a footbridge with a roof that kind of emulates that. And part of the thought was that granite structure, there's the potential to actually be able to ramp up to it and then maybe ramp over the canal out to Tanner Street as one idea, and you'll see that in the concepts. But really, it's about different ways to draw from the history, but also kind of engage these objects that are interesting but not particularly useful to current park use. So without further ado, concept one, as it's so glamorously called, we start kind of from a minimal standpoint. We left the parking alone, and because, as I said, it's really an asset to the park. I'm going to jump over here for a second. Left the parking alone for the most part, sort of strengthened the connection out to Village Street. And one of the things that we noticed right away was what happens is the pedestrian access kind of runs into the parking, right? And it runs into the sort of the informal parking that's going on the private lot here. So we looked at that and had several alternatives to that. One was to say, well, look, we can come in and then we can have a sidewalk that kind of continues through the park, pick up this parking use perhaps, and provide that for that parcel through some kind of a easement or something like that, but allow kind of clean connections into the park, takes you further in, takes you to different features. In this particular concept, we left the grass panel here more or less alone, but what we were looking at was everything that's out here, there's a bench, but there's really not much going on to the water's edge. A couple of things we talked about was allow people to get out to the water's edge and sort of provide accommodations like benches, these kind of, say, maybe there's like those pergola structures with the swing benches or something. Allow people to get out to the water's edge, sit there and enjoy it, and make these in a way that they could be two-sided, perhaps. That's another option. You could have a swing bench where you look one way, or you could have a double-sided bench where you look out or you look in. One of the things we also recognize is the current fence sits back, I don't know, at least 5 or 8 feet from the wall's edge. So it kind of further restricts you from getting to the water's edge. I think they did that because maybe some of the concerns of complications of the wall, that sort of thing. But I think one of the things to look at would be moving that railing right up to the wall's edge and being able to come up, peer into the water, cast a line in, whatever it is. As I mentioned, we kind of looked at this piece and we said, well, got a couple different ideas here. One was an observation deck up on the flat part of it. Let's just put a deck on there, put some railings, make it safe. We think we could get a rampway that comes up here to give people access to that. And it's just a great place to go and see the views of the river, and quite frankly, turn around and see the views of the park. They're pretty special from up there. Kind of the wild idea was maybe provide, because there's no easy accessibility out this side of the park, would be to put a footbridge spanning the old canal here and sort of make it reminiscent of a canal, a gatehouse, and have an accessible connection here. Of course, the problem with Tanner Street is there's no sidewalk on this, but build it and they will come, right? Kind of an idea that I think there's portions of sidewalk on this side, but that could be a future project, similar to what happened over at Canal Street, where they kind of got out in front of that one and rebuilt the sidewalks. And then the last major piece of this was we looked at water access. There's kind of a foot trail down here, but trying to do anything accessible in the natural area or along this edge was really difficult. But this cove, as we called it, really lent itself to some kind of accessible float system, dock system, and much to David's chagrin, I think we kind of came around to that's probably the best way to do it, and it's probably the most accessible place for maintenance and that kind of thing. So, so that's concept one. All right, concept two. I'm going to come back over here. It's easier. Similar kind of similar approach. Only this one really strengthens this pedestrian connection to Village Street into the intersection with Canal Street by kind of realigning the parking, taking away one side of the parking, and bringing this straight through. So I'll call it kind of a pedestrian spine through the center of the park, really bringing people deep into the heart of the park, still having kind of this circular expression that exists today, and then looking to, again, kind of activate the water's edge with some walkways. And I will let you know, there's an interesting kind of, a lot of granite wall, but then there's kind of a concrete wall and a concrete pad here, if you've ever noticed it. And there's a gate. It looks like it, I don't know if the gate was for maintenance or if it was for fishing, but it's been kind of closed up. But we thought about trying to make that accessible, but it proves to be pretty difficult in terms of getting ramps down to it, because it's I forget exactly what it is, but it ends up being, rise over run kind of a thing where the ramp system kind of gets ungainly. We restructured the parking so that all parking was kind of on the park's edge. So again, you could sit in your car and watch the activities, or at least when you park here, you get out onto a walkway and not kind of wander through the parking area. And then similar fashion over here, we were looking at some kind of a gangway system and a float, but we were looking at this part of it maybe being more actually built, so that it's sort of walls and ramps built into the shoreline edge versus it all being removable and seasonal, because that increases kind of the yearly maintenance. But that would be access to and from the water. And then finally, in this version, we were looking at this structure and we were saying, well, maybe the thing that has to happen is that structure needs to be lowered down. We need to take some of the levels of the granite off of it, maybe use that somewhere else, and just kind of have that as sort of call it a patio or a place to kind of sit and gather. You could still see the views. Maybe we could do some kind of a shade structure on it, have a little rampway system, still make it accessible. But it would open up the views here more and kind of address that problem. In each of these, I should mention, as we go through, we're envisioning it sort of additional planting. Some places we might be impacting a couple of the trees. Some of them are aging out, but we would be looking to kind of reinforce that. And this one kind of had an idea of bringing in a sidewalk connection. They don't all show that, but that's definitely a possibility of connecting out to Tanner Street as well as to Village Street. And here I think on this one, we're expressing kind of this foot trail down to the water. So finally, everybody with me so far? I'm running on fumes here. So this one, we kind of put this one third because it was sort of a broader change of the park. And part of it was addressing the way the parking relates to everything and the fact that it's a dead end. It's never good to have dead end circulation. A lot of times the parking, it's not that much parking that I think it's a killer, but we explored this, and part of it was the idea that we have this kind of awkward sawtooth character to the water's edge as the remnants of the old mill construction. And so it's sort of funny that you get these funny little corners and everything. And the idea of this sort of circular form in the landscape is always very attractive because it eliminates the hard edges and corners of rectangles. And so we're trying to counter all this geometry with sort of this pure arc. And you see what it does is we end up with a very prominent kind of walk-in, and then this circular walkway kind of almost takes you through so much of the park as you walk through, and it also provides the accessibility from the parking. With the idea that now we're paying to sort of reconfigure the parking, and but it does give more green space in areas that I think could use more green space. And we're always trying to pull back a little bit and actually add some trees in to kind of buffer the relationship of the home to the park. And in this case, thinking of really kind of lining the old canal here so that it feels a little more like a corridor. Because the walls kind of do that, but it needs a little more to sort of really call it out. And on this particular one, we did the sort of the ramping up and kept the footbridge in with a connection over the Tanner Street, but we envisioned not only the overlook, but sort of some tiered platforms here so that you could sit and kind of hang out and view the park and that sort of thing. And, you know, it's just trying to make the most use of this structure. And this one, like the first one, leaves the access kind of out here more informal as it is today, and the informal pathways down. So it's a little bit more of wilderness. I've used a term in the past, I stole it from Kevin Lynch, who was a designer, gradation of access, where some places you can't make everything accessible, but some places you don't, you know, that you go in and it's all very accessible and it's semi-accessible, and then it's accessible for those that dare tread there. And sometimes that sort of gives a park more character and more opportunity. So those are our three concepts. I think now we're going to break out into groups. We have each concept. We're going to kind of each have stations. You can come around. We're going to pass out the dots. We're doing sticker science here. So I think the idea is walk around, put dots on things you really like, and you know, put all your dots on one thing if you love it, but maybe take a little time, walk around, look at each option first, or if you know what you want, go for it. We've also got pictures of the inspiration board, so feel free to sticker those as well.
Do you want to do general questions first, and then we'll
Yeah,
pick up?
yeah.
Yeah, so if there's any general questions, then we'll reconvene for more questions too.
General question. Well, I think the current park has signs that says, you know, do not put a kayak in here. And I'm assuming that's because the city doesn't want you to put a kayak in there. Is that a city policy, or is that like just a sign to cover your butts, or is that a desirable thing to kayak on that part of the river? I always thought you weren't supposed to do that there because of the dam or whatever, so.
When we went through the exercise with the Canal Street part,
Yep.
they didn't want the kayaks that close to the dam, but on the other side of the bridge,
Right.
they didn't have as many concerns. I'm guessing that sign is just because there's no safe access,
Okay.
that Dave agrees with that. So there's currently no, so we'll create safe access and take that sign away.
Hard policy, but-
No, it's not a policy, it's just because of the safe access. Yep.
I have a sort of follow-up question to that, if I could. How, you know, some of the docks and water access you showed look like lakes where the water is not moving. Have you tested the current there? Because I've heard that the current is pretty strong in that area, so you can come downriver, but getting back upriver can be difficult.
Okay.
Yeah,
And is the water, what is the water access for besides kayaks?
Kayaks, canoes, paddle boards, no, we're not envisioning motorboats, unless you have like,
Because the current, we live on the other side of the river, our house, you can see our backyard on that picture. And I do swim in the river, and the current is really strong sometimes, and you don't realize it.
Yeah.
I mean, it can be really tough. I mean, I jumped off our dock one time and ended up 10 feet down the river when I came up, so,
Yeah.
and I thought it was a calm day.
Another thing is where the water access is there, that catches all kinds of debris.
right,
Oh, we
When
watch it.
logs come down,
Yeah.
they get sucked right in there.
sort of eddy
So
back in
you'd
there.
have to have a maintenance thing constantly
Yeah.
to keep that
The-
for whatever.
Well, and I would add to this, that this is a conversation we want to have, because you folks live there, you see it every
Yeah.
day, to hear your perspectives, and
Yeah.
to hear you swim in it, it's really cool, but also to know, yeah, it's strong current.
Yeah, I
Is it-
mean, I watch that river every day,
Yeah,
and it's strong,
yeah.
yeah.
And the eddies start right above where the park is gonna be, the very strong eddies.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Because I've fished there,
I
and
don't think there
sometimes
should be water access at
it's
all.
difficult getting back, you know.
she's had her hand up for a long time.
I have a question on the parking
Yes,
from 1, 2, and 3. how many spaces are we talking?
Good question.
One, how many are we talking in two, and how many are we talking in three?
So, I cannot read this. Let me go back here. So, the first concept, the way it is today, is 23 spaces. That doesn't include the private spaces. Okay, so there's 23 current
Okay, so in the
spaces.
parking lot.
Yeah,
Okay.
this one is 17 spaces. Okay, so we've lost a few with the
So we've
reconfiguration.
gone from 23 to 17,
17, yes.
and what is number two?
And then number two is, this is about 14 spaces. And I think, yeah, it doesn't count this. And that's partly because we got rid of this parking along this edge to try to move everybody to the sort of the park side of it. So it's, I think one of the things we always try to do is, if I gave you the same one every time, you'd be like, okay, this sort of challenges you to say, how important is the parking to what we might get in exchange for that? In this case, you know, we're losing about 9 spaces to reorganize this and get this really strong kind of pedestrian path in here, because we had to slide the parking back a little bit to accomplish that. In the circular one, it's kind of a reconfiguration. It looks like a lot, but it's actually about the same square footage. It's just reconfigured the way it is. So that's one of the things that kind of test you as you evaluate these. What's most important, you know, is it the passive nature, the parking, the river views, or even the water access?
Would there still be parking? The parking is now allowed on the drive-in, on the right-hand side. It's like 4 spots there that are not allowed.
Right.
So, are you suggesting those are gone too, or?
We haven't really focused on that as much. I mean, that's, you know, certainly it's a little bit wide by a couple feet. We could narrow it down if we wanted to get a walk-in and maybe try to do like trees on both sides. But we haven't focused as much on that. I think if you have any thoughts about that, we'd like to hear them, whether it's unsafe or, you know.
No, I'm just trying to get an understanding of
Yeah.
the current number of spots to what's being proposed, that's all.
Yeah, we didn't really focus on this piece as much because it wasn't kind of to the crux of what we were trying to get at, so. But it is a way to say, yeah, there's an additional 4 there, or we could, you know, if push comes to shove, we could eliminate those if that was not something people wanted to see, so. Yes, sir.
So,
Which-
Sorry.
Sorry.
if you're gonna move the fence to the front of the foundation, let's call it.
Yeah.
Are you gonna strengthen that whole section there, but, you know, there's lots of
Yeah, there,
places where water can get behind there
I
and cause
thi-
problems?
I think there are a number of things like the current and the eddies and that sort of thing. I think further review needs to be done here. I think when I look at these walls, they look pretty good all the way up to about the apple tree. And then they get a little bit shaky. And then you've got sort of this strange underlying concrete structure to it. So we're trying to understand a little bit, because they don't show up in the old mill pictures. Are some of those the old raceways? Did they fill those in?
Good, the cement platform that you're talking about was put there by a guy who wanted to make a restaurant, where he was talking about the private place.
Oh,
And then he abandoned it, when Royer, who lived there, Royer, who owned that lot, said he didn't want to hear any smelling hamburgers, so he put the sidewalk on. But the path, I mean, the fishing platform, as you call it,
yeah.
could you put a path down to the right side of that? Or,
Over here?
yeah, right now, there's a little path there that everybody uses to get onto that.
I think it would lend itself to a path. The only thing is that is a private parcel, so we would have to go onto the private parcel.
No, I'm fine.
You talking to the side right in
Yeah,
here?
right, yeah, the fence ends, then there's like a 4-foot spot,
Yeah.
and people go down through there.
What we were finding, yeah, like this one shows, we had to do a little bit of a traditional ramp configuration, which we absolutely try not to do. We just don't want them in the landscape. But to get this to work, we had to do something like this and then have a pathway that sort of came up under the 5% grade. So it ended up being more intrusive, and we ended up with sort of these dualities. And I think on another one, I think on 3, we explored kind of coming back this way. We were able to do it without ramps, but it becomes much more intrusive to the park, where you're starting here and you're going down and down in grade. So just trying to stay along the property line, I don't think it would work. I think we need to kind of keep extending to get the run.
And when you say accessible, you just use 5%, we're talking about the wheelchair accessible?
Yeah, so like, in my world, what I try to make every walkway under 5%. That way I don't have to do ramps and railings, clutters up the landscape, but
Sure.
I can go up to 8.33%. But that's, then anything over 5% requires the ramps and railings configuration, so.
So even though we're gonna do improvements in the natural area, are you thinking about that has to be accessible too, to wheelchairs?
We don't have to make everything accessible, but that's why I call this kind of, let it be informal, because then it's like, nothing can stop you from going out there, but if we put a walkway in that doesn't meet accessibility grades, then we're on the hook for it, so that's where I talk about the gradation of access. We're trying to make this really accessible and then start to kind of fade off what we're doing as one approach. This one was actually building on the idea that one of the plans that Beth showed up front was there were a bunch of arrows along the waterfront kind of showing access, kind of following the river. And that arrow kind of came right up through the park to Tanner Street, and then it went up to, I think, Washington Street. Sort of the idea, almost like a river path, following it all along. Difficult to implement, it takes years sometimes to do that because there's things in the way. But we were trying to get that in as far as possible, where you kind of create this, almost a sense of conclusion to it here with access out to Tanner Street. But that's kind of why we brought it in further, sort of explore that idea of how far can we make it accessible, again, without getting, into crazy ramp systems. I tried to run a ramp here. It took me all the way down and around the corner to get it in there, and I'm like, now I'm filling over the head of the canal, and I'm doing all kinds of crazy things. It didn't feel right. So we explored other ideas. That I had this great idea of sort of trying to lower the grade back to the river and make this the way to get into the river, but it was just too much. It was, too steep, too much grade change to overcome.
So one last question, if you don't mind. What about lighting and interpretive signs, that kind of stuff that we talked about?
Yeah, we didn't really get into that too much because I think going in, our understanding is lighting, benches, and interpretive signs would sort of match what was done in Canal Street. So there's some uniformity to the two parks. So the lighting would be the same style, the benches would be the same style, not the canoes, but the other benches, and then some kind of an interpretive feature here would be awesome because
For the head wall.
yeah, to sort of interpret this, or even to interpret all the things that you can't even imagine were there now, But unfortunately, if anybody's got pictures, we could not find a picture of this. We looked and looked. Sometimes you can find them in different places, but
Picture of the head wall. when
the,
it was
the head
exactly-
wall or the opening to the canal, that would be very cool to have. Yes.
Hi, I just wanted to mention something. I know it's premature to talk about lighting when we're still in this phase, but there is just, as you mentioned, a lot of activity behind that ledge. And a lot of broken glass, and I worry about, people with dogs or children going into that area. So when the lighting becomes part of the conversation, I think it's gonna be really important if that structure is retained to light that in a way that the security issues are addressed.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
that particular spot.
And I think our approach, because obviously if we keep the form, the structure that's there, and I actually don't know yet if we could get rid of it because it could be considered a historic element. I would think it would be. So, but kind of the thinking around it was if we can bring more activity to this, like the idea of the overhead, sort of the scenic overlook, bring pathways here. I always say, like, neglect is the friend of somebody like wanting to do something like that because they don't think anybody's ever gonna come there. If you've got the possibility that your parent's gonna walk up above you and suddenly be there, or somebody's gonna come around the corner, whether it's just a neighbor that lives there or a police officer or something, the more activity, it sort of discourages that. But lighting would be definitely a key part of that. And
Yeah, I agree, that's like good daytime stuff,
Yeah.
people that do bad things do it at night, so.
yeah, which is, most parks close at sunset, so it does
Yeah.
leave the problem of whoever wants to sneak in can kind of find their place to do that, so.
Well, there's no sneaking in, it's just.
Yeah,
It's-
it's wide open.
Park in the parking lot overnight either, and that's.
Yeah,
doesn't happen.
which is probably an enforcement thing. If there's a car there, probably it should be checked out from time to time.
That does happen from time to time.
Yeah.
So if you were to reduce the height of the head wall, would that negate the historical value of it?
Yes.
I think it would.
Who said that?
Can you guess?
Yeah. I mean, one of the cool features is like, I think it's this side, it has this giant metal strap to it. And you're like, so you kind of get what they were, you think about the ice flows. And I'd love to go out here with a shovel and see how deep it goes, because it's like when you look at that dam to here, it's quite a grade change. So I imagine this is a much deeper area, but I don't know for sure,
On top of the head wall, it's supposed to be 22 feet to the bottom of the canal.
Is that right?
That's what I heard.
Yeah, so it was pretty deep, so. Wasn't a place for small children.
People do hang out on top of it
All
all
the
the time.
time.
Yeah,
And kids climb up on it all the time. There's holes in the top of it now.
yeah,
And they're gonna step in that and break their legs. whatever.
yeah, that's where
That's all,
yeah, we thought if we could do something, non-destructive to it, but make more use of it and maybe even protect it a little bit, that would be good. And the rest of the wall, I think, we'd have to study this further to understand, like, we'd like to repair it, but what would be the cost of doing that? What are we getting ourselves into, but ideally, we'd like to move that fence right up to the edge so you don't, it feels kind of almost like a construction fence where I can't get to it, so. Did you have a question in the back?
Oh, I was wondering, do all three plans, do they compare in cost pretty well?
We haven't run any cost numbers on them
Okay.
yet. I would say they're probably pretty close.
That's what I
Probably
was
the
thinking.
first one saves a little bit of money.
Yeah.
I think we're thinking we would repave the parking anyway. It's kind of in bad shape. So there's already a cost to repave.
Right.
The additional cost to sort of reconfigure or move it would be that you'd have to kind of, do the earthwork and the subgrade before you paved it. So it's a good opportunity sometimes where you say, well, if we're going to repave it anyway, well, let's rethink about
Right.
where it is and how it's configured. I think the other thing we recognize is the closer we move to the waterfront, the probably more resistance we're going to get from the environmental folks. That they're going to probably like us to be further back, just purely from the riverfront kind of, buffer zone. And as I mentioned, we've got, this line, I believe, is the 100-year flood. So you see it's not greatly impacting the park, but there is a line that kind of cuts more through here, which is the floodway. And that's the one we'd have to be very careful about not really providing, we'd have to be careful about filling in it, so. Yes,
Sorry, I have another question.
sorry.
So is the water access a given? Is that something?
No, so
Okay.
so tonight, nothing's a given.
Oh,
Tonight
okay.
is to get everybody's feedback of,
Okay.
this is the first thing we're
So-
doing.
Yeah.
The other thing, my other concern about the water is because this section of the river is small and isolated, we see so much wildlife out there. There are beavers, there are otters, there are all kinds of waterfowl. And the more people you put on that river, the less of that you're gonna see. It's gonna go away. So I know this section is nice and it just goes up the left side to the canal there. It's maybe an hour ride up and back in your kayak, but I really would hate to see it change from the way it is. The ecosystem in that river right there.
Can I kind of just follow up on a couple of those questions? Because one is, Yeah, we understood that there was the boat launch up the river. and
On the
when we-
island.
Yeah, when we look at it, we see that there's dams
Yeah.
kind of in both ways, but has anybody kayaked or canoed down? Anybody here that has done that? 'Cause like,
Down from that.
yeah, from the
You can't-
island?
You can't go from that.
So there-
No, you can't come
There,
this.
there are several dams. I don't know if maybe somebody came along and then got
You
out
can
and went
only-
around, or,
What's that, upriver, you can only go upriver.
yeah. And has anybody kayaked out of here? Has Anybody?
You're not supposed to.
Oh, because the sign's out there. Yeah, there's a lot of signs
There's a
out there, you
sign
know, it's like,
Hypothetically,
Yeah.
has anybody?
it's
So
like,
golf.
it's like, don't read the sign. What?
You can't golf.
It's golf is forbidden.
Yeah, golf is forbidden, yeah, yeah.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I find golf balls in the strangest places. It's like, some people just go out and hit a bucket. Yeah,
So what would happen with right now that you're parking some of the people who got kicked out of the Canal Street side,
They're back at Canal Street.
they're back?
Yeah, those signs are gone now.
So it's the whole place is accessible.
Yes.
Thank you.
Althea, did you have another question? Sorry.
I had a comment and a question.
Hmm.
I'm here as an individual, but I am a member of the board of the Penacook Historical Society,
Hmm.
and I also work for the New Hampshire Preservation Alliance.
ah,
So,
This is why you're going.
but I will say that, you know, it's really difficult for people to conceive how there were canals. Why is it Canal Street?
yeah,
What are you talking about? That the canals went under Village Street, that there were buildings over the canals? So this is like the last element, historical element that we have that can help people understand that whole history. And the canals, of course, were what made Penacook like an industrial center.
sure.
So in my opinion, it's really crucial to keep up the entire structure. I could see putting something over the top so that you can access it better and it's smooth and you can walk up there.
Yeah.
But that would be my personal strong preference. And then my other question was, of the three scenarios, which, to me, the real beauty of that park is the views, as you've mentioned.
Yes.
The views across the river, and then the views up the river are just
Stunning.
like,
Yeah,
you know, it just makes your day better,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
So of the three designs, which would you say makes best use or, you know, of those views?
Honestly, I think they all do. I think they were all intended. I mean, this one, with its formal path around, sort of, it gives you kind of a ground viewing, you know, that you can picture, here's benches here, you know, we didn't pave everything. We thought, there's some nice river birches in here. So we said, let's leave some of it more natural, but we were trying to give access and views. There's definitely views a lot of ways from here. There would be views from here. But this would give you ground views, but that was always the idea of this part, was to say, let's get up there and really give that. And I think some understory clearing in here might really benefit from those views as well. But I think every one of them was trying to take advantage of it. I think this is the only one where we formally paved down and around here, and maybe that lends itself. But part of it is like, well, do you need this if you've got that? Maybe the answer is yes. But I think all of them were kind of that idea of trying to move people through the landscape where they kind of can experience all these almost like in one walk, where it's not just sitting looking at one static view, but you're seeing sort of the rocky cliffs here, and then as you sort of transition out here, and then you really get those long views up the river, which are pretty stunning. And to a certain degree, there's even kind of a view down to the Village Street Bridge.
Where you look from there, it's
Yeah. So I think that's probably the primary asset of the park. I think I'll get right to you. I think the other part was, we thought, well, if there's a real demand for water access, then that's something that is really not there now. And if it's not, that's fine. If that's the thing, because it does bring, there's a cost to that, and a maintenance sort of follow-up year after year to maintain those kind of systems. So, if it's not something that people are going to want to see and use, then it's probably not worth doing it.
Well, people want to cool off, it's gonna get hotter around here,
Yeah,
and people will want to have access to the river.
yeah,
And so, as much as I hear the lady talking about the current, I agree with that totally.
yeah,
But there could be a safe place to just go dip yourself,
yeah,
as opposed to go swimming,
yeah.
just to cool off.
Maybe dangling your feet. Well,
Yeah.
I was just thinking with the current and the bridge is right there and then the dam, I mean, how can you really play in that water?
Oh,
Like,
right where the old dam used to be,
Yeah,
if you go, there's like, what he's talking about, there's like a little cove right there,
Yeah, right here.
right
but
there.
I mean, to kayak and,
No, no,
this
no.
just doesn't seem like a place where you could really kayak or
I-
paddleboard in that section of the river.
I think the way we see this is a quieter place and it's not as deep. I think the current is moving through here.
I agree.
So this tends to be the kind of the place you'd want to come in or out of because it would be a little quieter. If it's really that strong, then
So you
maybe,
would go that way?
I think predominantly you would,
Going up
yeah.
to only go that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if the current's so strong that you can't do that,
Yeah.
it means
right.
that really you're limited to people coming down. And I think,
Coming out.
yeah, and coming out, which would make a ton of sense, except that we know there are dams on both
But where
lines.
are those people coming down from?
Yeah,
I mean, there's a ton of other kayak options
Yeah.
right around.
Maybe this should be focused on views.
And
Sure.
fishing.
Yeah.
People
And
fish
fishing.
there all
Or
the
dangle your
time.
feet in.
Fishing is great, yeah.
Fishermen are there all the time, is right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the biggest use I see.
People go in when they dump their phones into them.
right there. Oh, that's one right here. Yeah, so here's the park here, and you can see there's a good distance up. I didn't measure it, but
You,
on this
No,
branch
no,
of the
no.
river, there's 2 dams.
no, you
Very
can't
far.
go up that way.
That-
You cannot kayak
that-
up past that fork to the right on the
Up.
river. You
Right
can
here?
go up the canal on the left, but you cannot go up on the right. It's all rocky and white water.
Oh, it's all
and
rocky,
you can get
okay.
out and walk around on the river. I mean, it's.
Okay,
and
Oh,
there's
right, that's
no-
behind the,
yeah.
Where
So
that
it's-
boat, where that boat.
It's kind of what you got down here.
Island shores, yeah, you're right, it is all rocky.
Okay,
I share it, yeah.
Where that boat launch is, there's no access from there down to Penacook.
No, you have,
Right,
you can only
right.
go upstream.
well, we've got dams here and here, and now what I'm hearing is this is very rocky.
It's
and
not
It's like
accessible.
bedrock.
Yeah, it's not.
It's not a place
it's
to be
not
boating,
right.
yeah.
You know, plus you have a very short ways away, many other options.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tons. Yeah.
Anybody that's gonna go kayaking is gonna go from
The boat launch,
the boat launch north
well,
or south, I mean.
West.
Is that
Penacook.
Is that Penacook River kayak
Yes.
right there?
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
No, that's further down.
Oh,
That's
there's
further
one.
down.
That's, yeah, that's actually,
Island shores.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And I can confirm, like, we desperately wanted to figure out how to launch our kayaks from right there, the first time living on riverfront property, and I wouldn't,
Yeah.
we see those currents, and with the dam control upstream,
Right.
sometimes
They
the
control the
water
dam,
coming
right.
down is,
right,
it's wild, you
That's
can
right.
see it, it's,
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Yeah.
don't, there's no way, and
Yeah.
she's right, like, it's like all exposed
right,
bedrock between the dam and the fork right there,
Yeah.
so.
Right.
And that's
so
right,
really,
they do
I mean,
control the water flow. So some
Yeah.
days it's very calm and still, and the next day it's rushing through.
Right,
Yeah.
and the same is
Yeah.
true, conditions really vary with that second, with the fork, the bottom fork, I guess.
Right here.
Yeah, sometimes water comes out of there really
Yeah.
quickly, sometimes it kind of backwaters and goes the other way.
Huh.
There's so many
Variables.
safety concerns that I
Yeah.
have, and
Okay.
there's like almost nowhere, except maybe your property, where like, if someone needed to get out of the river, they could do so
Right.
safely.
That's
It's
right.
too
Just
steep on this
our
side,
house
it's
and the
rocky.
next door neighbor, does it come up gradually to the back of our property, the river?
Yeah, and I would love to,
So
I would love to kayak somewhere, but this stretch, I live on it, and
May not be the place.
If I could, I still wouldn't.
So let me shift the focus a little, because I think we're hearing this pretty loud and clear. This is not really
No.
boatable, this is really difficult. What about fishing? Anybody
Yes.
fish?
Fish all the time.
Fish
That's
people?
number one use.
They
So-
stand on the angled
good.
dam,
Yeah,
Yeah,
So-
not plow, we go.
yeah.
so if we made it easier to fish, and maybe fishing is the water access.
Yeah.
With their children all the
Yeah,
time.
you wanna, so I had that one image of sort of that tiered kind of seating.
So that was my idea, is that if you put a.
One more?
The rocks are still-
Yeah, right here.
That's cool too.
Something like that where, you know, if we did that in the cove, now I don't know where the fish are. I never have.
In the water.
Whenever I fish. That something like that would be then usable for fishing. It would also be a great place to sit, but then there's not really the idea of, we get rid of the boat idea.
I mean, the one you were showing with the rocks, that's all wonderful. It's
Yeah.
just what I see what that looks like in 10 years.
Yeah.
Judging from what the park looks like now,
Yeah,
and it's
Sure.
still like crap.
so you're referencing,
You should do something that's more bomb-proof and
Natural.
wood decks and stuff.
went the wrong way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's natural.
Something like this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not as
No, that's a
maybe
lake.
accessible, but, I mean, it's flat, and you can stand on it.
I mean, if there was
And you don't have
something
to
like
stay in
that, it would get a lot of use.
It would be far more durable than any
It would be,
any wood
right.
deck, yeah.
And it kind of
And
would look
natural.
natural with the granite head wall and everything else, kind of.
Sounds like
That's all
a,
substantial stuff. you know?
sounds like a sticker moment to me.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you did put a platform along that line of the existing dam,
Yeah,
well, that gets you out like 30 feet into the river, something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe not that far, but that gets you out there. And why couldn't you just put a little ladder at the end of that to get down into that area that I was just talking about,
yeah.
the dip?
Yeah, well, I,
You go to that, you can go to that picture again, we had, now
I'm all turned around now.
that's it.
Yeah,
Isn't that one there?
they do have a ladder. We were discussing whether that was for swimming or whether that was just a way to get out if somebody fell in, because obviously, that looks like a place for a great party, and I can imagine some of the accidents they have. So. Yeah, and it doesn't have to be one or the other. There's opportunity, I think, for both. Because there is that area just upstream of the old dam where I'm with you that I love old industrial history and I would hate to wipe it out, I think, whenever you find traces. Because you hear about these things, you think that's impossible. And then you see these pictures and it's incredible, and it's our history. So, but if we could integrate some of those boulders down in there and maybe have something like this, whether it's on the granite structure or down by the water, doesn't mean we can only do one or the others.
Something like that could be on that top of that dam, right, to make it flat, so it's not canted,
Yeah,
so people could, because
Yeah.
people, they walk out there now and kind of
yeah,
stand awkwardly and fish.
yeah.
That thing's not as pretty as the.
They're anglers.
They're angler, yes.
Yeah.
Good one. All right, we're our first time. Meeting's over.
Oh, what a guy.
Got a question over here? Yeah.
And we can come back to it if we're wanting to keep going with the water access, but I'm wondering about the parking. Like,
Yes.
what is the current amount of use there? I'm only there like in the evenings and weekends and I rarely see much, but
Probably talk to the strings and things guys. They'll tell you.
Yeah.
From 4 to 6, sir?
Yeah, I mean, there are people that are parking there
Yeah.
that work around that area too.
yeah, I was wondering about that.
Mhm.
It's never been filled since it was built.
I've never seen one.
But you don't want to take away any parking anywhere now with all the things that are going on.
Yeah.
I can't see taking away parking spaces.
So how many vehicles are there usually, would you say? I mean, are there 10 or are there 5 or are there, you said there were 23 slots.
It seems like anywhere, I don't know, between 5 and 10, more like in that range.
Yeah, I would say its busiest is probably like 6 to 7 spots empty. So it's getting a lot more use these days. And we live right next to it, so and we try to walk our puppy and she's very skittish, so we know when all the cars are coming and going.
I was gonna say, because I work during the week, so I'm only there evenings and weekends, and
Yeah,
it's often straight up empty.
Yeah.
I rarely see more than a car or two.
I would say from,
But that's
you know,
helpful to know.
like 2 to 7-ish, it's pretty active these days, during the week,
It's all because of the music store.
which is great.
Well, we now have soft serve ice cream right
Yes.
close
That's good
by.
too.
Yes.
I do not live in your neighborhood, I live on Primrose,
Right.
and so I would park there.
Yeah.
And
Right.
the same thing, we will have,
But the,
I don't think this is a
the
secret.
added
but
activity
We will
helps
have,
the park.
a few concerts in the park this summer.
That'd be great. I have a band.
We will, and that, okay,
Hmm.
speak up.
Oh my gosh,
And
ice
that
cream.
would be a great place to be parking and
Yeah,
a short,
It's an
short walk.
underused parking area right now.
yeah,
It is.
Yeah.
So you
I
say
hate
grab
to,
an ice cream, go sit by the river.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean,
That's great.
Yeah.
I am a tree person, so it doesn't sound like it, but I would hate to see you take any of those parking spaces away.
Right.
I think there are times when we would be using all of them.
Yeah, and I think old villages like Penacook have the storefront buildings right up to the edge of the sidewalk, which I think most of us really admire that. You know, like if you live in a community that's lost that, you realize all you look at is parking all day. So having those back lots is really the secret to making those places successful. So I agree that knowing, if you go to a place like that and you're like, I don't want to have to fight for a parallel space on a busy street, but you know, I know where there's a back lot and there's always a space there. It's your like little secret, you know, so. So I think we recognize that it's an asset for not only the park, but probably even more for the, you know, the downtown.
We classify the parking as municipal. It does support downtown, so as downtown gets busier, it's not like we're gonna have more parking areas created, so I think,
Yeah,
yes, it's a parking lot for the park, but it's also a parking lot for the village, so.
Oh, so
Yeah.
people could park there and get on the little bus and go down into
Yeah, or
town and,
you wanna have lunch,
Yeah.
anything, so it's a parking lot, but it's a municipal parking lot for the downtown village.
right. Ready to dot? All right, we're gonna set up, I think we're gonna have one over there, one over there, one up here. And, yeah.
So for the next steps of this project, we're going to take all the information that we gathered here tonight. We'll come up with an overall concept plan, and we'll probably plan another public meeting either through the Penacook Village Association, but stay tuned for information about that probably over the summer, because once we have a concept plan, we're going to want to apply for funding, and we'll go from there. So you can check out the city's website under community development. We'll post the presentation from tonight, the plans, Concord TV video, so you can watch it again, and we'll put information back out on the same channels as we're ready to move to the next steps.